This wasn't just another win to close out March, and anyone watching closely could feel that early in the night, because inside Crypto.com Arena, the scoreboard almost felt secondary to what was really unfolding. The game was under control, clean execution, no real tension, but then, during a timeout, something unexpected happened. Rui Hachimura glanced over at the opposing bench, saw Anthony Davis sitting there in different colors, and for a split second, he froze. It wasn't planned, it wasn't exaggerated, it was just real, like his mind hadn't fully caught up with the fact that Ad wasn't part of this locker room anymore. And that moment says more than people think. In today's NBA, things move fast. Trades happen, rosters shift overnight. But with a franchise like the Lakers, certain connections don't just disappear. Davis wasn't just another player passing through. He carried part of that championship standard, part of what this jersey represents. So when a player instinctively still sees him as one of their own, that's not confusion. That's memory that hasn't faded yet. Hachimura didn't try to play it off either. After the game, he admitted it straight up, said he almost walked over to greet him like nothing had changed. It was a light moment, even funny on the surface, but also something every fan could relate to, because a lot of people are still adjusting to how quickly everything shifted. Meanwhile, on the floor, LeBron controlled the entire night the way only he can. Triple-double, steady pace, complete command of the game. Even with a key piece missing from the lineup, the team didn't lose its structure. That matters this time of year. That tells you something about where this group is mentally. Right Lakers pride if you have supported this team through every era. And this win wasn't just about stacking another result. It was about showing that there's real depth here, that adjustments can be made without everything falling apart. Because heading into the final stretch, that's what separates teams that fade from teams that stay dangerous. Inside the organization, there's a very clear belief that what this team has been doing since mid-January hasn't been fully recognized outside the building. The record, the consistency, the way they've handled injuries, it all tells a different story than the one being pushed nationally. And that brings everything back to Luka Doncic. Not just the numbers, not just the highlights, but the control he has over everything this team runs. When things slow down, when possessions matter more, he's the one dictating how this team breathes on offense. The coaching staff isn't holding back on this either. There's a strong internal push behind the idea that if this level holds through the end of the regular season, his case for MVP isn't just strong, it's undeniable. Not based on a stretch, not based on momentum, but based on sustained impact across the entire year. Inside that locker room, there's no debate about it. And honestly, there's a growing sense that what he's doing still isn't getting the respect it deserves. And that frustration, it's starting to build quietly behind the scenes. You can feel it in the way they talk after games, in the tone, in the pauses. There's a quiet conviction that this group hasn't shown its full version yet. Not because of lack of talent, but because the timing hasn't lined up all season. Injuries, adjustments, new roles. It's been a constant process of recalibration. Lakers Nation, subscribe right now because the next few weeks could bring some huge news for this franchise. And still, they've held position near the top of the conference. That doesn't happen by accident. It happens when a team understands how to survive the nights when things aren't perfect. That's something experienced fans recognize immediately. The ability to stay afloat while figuring things out. At the same time, there's something else building behind the scenes that goes beyond this current run. The front office is already looking ahead, not in a passive way, but with intent. There's a clear awareness that what this team has might not be the final version needed to meet the expectations that come with this franchise. The idea of adding another major piece isn't just speculation floating around. It's part of ongoing internal evaluation. The balance they're trying to strike is delicate. You want to maximize what you have right now, especially with the level of play being delivered nightly, but you also can't ignore what it takes to separate yourself when the postseason tightens everything. That's where the conversations get more complex. It's not just about talent, it's about fit, durability, and whether a move actually elevates the group instead of reshaping it in a risky way. The cost matters too, not just financially, but in depth, chemistry, and future flexibility. Comment, never count out the Lake Show. if you know this team is always one move away from changing everything, and this is where things get interesting for anyone paying close attention. There's a growing sense that the organization is preparing for something bigger than a routine offseason. Not reckless, not desperate, but calculated. The kind of move that aligns with both the present window and what comes next. If you've been following this team long enough, you already know how quickly things can shift in Los Angeles. One decision, one addition, one adjustment, and suddenly the entire ceiling changes. That's the reality of a franchise that doesn't operate with modest expectations. Before we go further, if you've been keeping up with these updates and want the kind of insight that goes beyond the headlines, this is the moment to lock in. Subscribe now, because what's unfolding here is still developing, and the next pieces of this story are going to matter more than most people realize, because internally there's still something that hasn't been fully revealed, and the closer this team gets to the postseason, the clearer it's becoming that what we've seen so far might only be setting the stage for what's about to happen next. There are already internal scenarios being mapped out that go beyond small tweaks, and people around the league are starting to notice that Los Angeles is positioning itself with patience, not hesitation. That distinction matters. This isn't a front office reacting. It's one that's waiting for the right moment to act. One name that keeps surfacing in conversations is tied to the idea of adding size, spacing, and scoring versatility without completely disrupting the current structure. Someone who can operate off the ball, punish defenses when attention shifts, and still hold his own when the game slows down in late possessions. The appeal is obvious when you look at how this roster is built. But here's the tension. Acquiring that kind of player doesn't come cheap. It would likely mean moving multiple rotation pieces that have played real minutes during this stretch. And that raises a question that doesn't have an easy answer. Do you sacrifice depth for a higher ceiling, or trust that what you have can peak at the right time? Inside the building, there isn't blind agreement on that. Some believe continuity is being undervalued, especially with how the group has started to stabilize. Others see a window that demands aggression, especially considering how quickly things can shift in this league. Los still believes if you trust the Lakers can rise when the pressure gets real. There's also another layer to this that hasn't been talked about enough: health. Not just who's available today, but who can be trusted to stay available when every possession starts to feel heavier. Decisions made now aren't just about talent. They're about reliability when everything is on the line. And while all of this is being evaluated, the locker room remains locked in on the present. Players understand what's at stake, not just in terms of seeding, but in how this team wants to be viewed heading into the playoffs. There's a difference between arriving and arriving with momentum. If the Los Angeles Lakers are your team, subscribe now so you never miss what's happening behind the scenes. If you've been around this franchise long enough, you know how quickly narratives flip when Los Angeles starts building rhythm at the right time. That's why these next games aren't being treated like routine matchups. They're being used to define identity. And if you're following this closely, now is the time to stay connected. Subscribe and stay with this channel, because the next developments around this roster aren't going to be slow or predictable. And when they happen, you're going to want to understand exactly what changed and why it matters. Because the truth is, there's still one more decision looming, and the way it plays out could reshape not just this season, but everything that comes after. And that pending decision isn't just about adding talent, it's about defining how far this version of the Lakers is willing to go to meet the standard that built this franchise. Inside that locker room, there's a clear understanding that opportunities like this don't wait. The next move, whether it happens now or later, will say everything about how this organization sees its chances when the lights get brighter. Right? The banners tell the story if you believe the history of this franchise still matters today. If you want to stay ahead of every move, every shift, and every inside detail as this unfolds, subscribe now and stay locked in, because what comes next could change everything for Los Angeles.